U.S. President Donald Trump says that China has become, quote, very spoiled with U.S. trade wins. This as Washington and Beijing are holding high-stakes trade negotiations. On his Twitter page, Trump said that he will meet with a U.S. delegation after they're back from China to determine the results of the talks. Delegations from Washington and Beijing held a two-day negotiation in China. The two sides discussed a range of issues, including expanding exports to China, protection of intellectual property rights, and the tariff dispute. The world's two leading economies are locked in a trade dispute. Well, this after Washington imposed tariffs on imports, which were directly aimed at China. Since then, Beijing has imposed its own tariffs on U.S. goods. Well, let's get some insights from Ontario. Joining me now is political commentator and analyst Jason Unruhe. Jason, good to have you with us. What do you make of this? Trump is saying that China is very spoiled with the U.S. trade wins and that he will determine the results of the talks when the U.S. delegation is back home.
I think once again, Trump has very poorly chosen his words in another delicate situation. The fact is, both the United States and China both need each other in order to carry out business. They need to trade with each other. They are the two biggest economies, and they are basically their two biggest partners. Basically, Trump is using the same rhetoric that he used during the election in order to allege that China has taken advantage of the United States and taken advantage of their mutually beneficial trade relationship. This is the same kind of nonsense that he's put to make it look like that manufacturing has to return home, that somehow it's China's fault that U.S. businesses have engaged in so much trade with the United States. And I think he's really just pushing the same line that he's used from the beginning. This is trying to drum up public support for his ongoing trade dispute with China that's completely unnecessary and doesn't even need to be happening. I think that in his mind, as long as he keeps this going, then he's somewhat kept up the spirit of what it was that he was promised, what he was promising during the election, that he was going to change the trade balances between the United States and other countries into something that he claimed would be more beneficial for the U.S. When we see in real life, the trade is much more complicated with that. And if have existed for quite some time, so very comfortable norms that both sides have been very used to. It seems like this is more Trump's rhetoric of just trying to stir up public support for his policies.
And Jason, one quick question. Do you think that the U.S. will gain something out of this dispute at the end of the day?
Well, that's hard to say. We don't really know how much this is really hurting China. It doesn't seem to be hurting them too badly. I think this is really on China. They might make a concession or two in order to placate Trump's, frankly, and a lot of people see the idea of Trump's ego in this situation. China may make some concessions, they may not. They've already decided that they're going to open up the country much more to foreign investment inside the country. Previously, there were limits to how much foreigners could invest in the country or how much they were allowed to own of property, etc. That restriction has been lifted by Xi Jinping. Some see this as some kind of concession that has already been made, and others say that it's something that has already been in the works. I think it's something we'll have to just wait and see.
All right. Thank you for your thoughts and comments. That was Jason Unruhe, political commentator, analyst, joining me from Ontario.